Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. On April 16, a warm wind gently caressed the maple-lined streets of Willow Creek, a small town in Kansas where time seemed to pass more slowly, as if the inhabitants respected a silent, almost sacred rhythm. Here, neighbors nodded to each other, gardens were patiently tended, and secrets often remained buried, much more so than in noisy big cities. That day, I was in my garden, kneeling among my pink and white peonies that were beginning to bloom. The damp earth smelled sweetly of spring, and the first bees slowly foraged. I was enjoying this peaceful moment, my gaze distractedly following the clouds stretching across a pale sky, when suddenly, I heard the quick, irregular footsteps of Ethan, my son, who was coming towards me. He had that gait I knew all too well, a mixture of urgency and restraint. He was wearing that blue plaid shirt I had given him for Christmas, the one he reserved for important occasions. But it wasn't his outfit that caught my eye. It was his look. Troubled. Almost lost. As if he were carrying the weight of something he didn't yet want to say, but which was eating away at him from the inside. His eyes, usually full of optimism and curiosity, had become heavy, clouded with a suppressed moisture. There was a distance in his gaze, as if he were looking beyond me, beyond our house, beyond Willow Creek. "Mom, you have to come with me. Now." His usually confident voice trembled slightly. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I wanted to ask him what was going on, but before I could open my mouth, he placed his hand gently on my shoulder, almost clumsily gentle, and guided me toward the aisle. There, beneath the old oak tree, a black car waited, parked in the soft light of the setting sun. A beautifully maintained 1970s Lincoln gleamed in the golden rays. The tinted windows made it difficult to see inside, adding to the aura of mystery. I stopped dead in my tracks, panting, frozen in front of the back door. My heart was beating faster, as if my body sensed an approaching storm. "Ethan, what is this? Where are we going?" He looked at me then, his eyes heavy with a truth too heavy to bear alone. "It's his last birthday, Mom." Time seemed to stand still. An icy silence fell over us. I couldn't understand. My breath caught, my thoughts swirled. "Who are you talking about?" I whispered, my voice choked. He didn't answer. He simply knelt down slightly and opened the door of the Lincoln. And there I saw it. The driver. At first, he didn't look at me. His slender hands, veins marked by time, gently gripped the leather steering wheel with an almost ceremonious precision. Every movement, every gesture, seemed measured, controlled. He wore a dark gray suit, perfectly tailored, as if he had donned his armor to face one last battle. The impeccably knotted tie, the crisp white shirt, everything evoked rigorous discipline, extreme restraint. But it wasn't just his appearance that caught my attention. It was the nape of the neck. That nape of the neck, tilted slightly forward, with a few strands of salt and pepper hair gently falling, was familiar enough to take my breath away. Despite the years, despite the absence and the silence, it was there, etched in my memory. Too familiar to be that of a mere stranger. My gaze clung to every detail, unable to look away, as if hypnotized by a past too heavy to be forgotten. Then, slowly, he turned his head. The movement was almost imperceptible, but in that simple gesture, I felt my whole world turn upside down. Our eyes met. A moment suspended in time, a burst of eternity where everything I had buried for 26 years resurfaced in an immense wave. I felt my heart explode silently, as if each beat was a restrained explosion. "James." Breathless, voice trembling, almost a whisper. "My husband. James Callahan. The man who disappeared overnight, taking with him all our promises, our hopes, and our dreams. Declared dead by default after a decade of anguish, desperate searches, unanswered questions, and dull pain that ate away at me from the inside." I was speechless, unable to articulate anything, frozen in that moment of profound disbelief. Ethan sat down next to me, gently breaking the silence with his presence. He too was carrying the weight of this moment, but his calmness was a stark contrast to my inner storm. The car started, its engine purring in the quiet of the afternoon. And I couldn't take my eyes off this man who, suddenly, was no longer a ghost. He was there. Alive. In front of me. For the first few minutes, not a word was spoken. The engine purred softly, carrying the black Lincoln along the road lined with flowering trees. The landscape passed by, hazy and soothing, but I was somewhere else, trapped in a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't control. Memories came rushing back, like lightning in a dark night. The morning James never came home. The desperate calls that remained unanswered. Sleepless nights spent watching the door. My hands were shaking as I called the police, then the hospitals. The dull fear that had turned into anger, resentment, incomprehension. And finally, the void, that gaping chasm that had swallowed me whole. He had given up everything. Moi. Our son. It is known. And yet, there in that car, he drove calmly, like a discreet chauffeur, a ghost returned on command, gliding silently into our shattered existence. I couldn't keep it all inside anymore. My voice, hoarse and broken, escaped despite myself. Will you at least explain it to me? He took a deep breath, almost as if trying to calm an inner storm. Without ever taking his eyes off the road, he replied in a low, almost resigned voice. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Evelyn. I left, yes. But not to run away from you. I clenched my fists, a stinging pain in the pit of my chest. So what? What did you run away from? Cancer? Debt? You left me alone with an 8-year-old. Ethan placed his hand on mine, gently, to soothe me. But I immediately withdrew it, unable to share the tenderness. James slowed the car, the sun was beginning to set, enveloping the surrounding hills in a fragile golden veil. His gaze darkened for a moment before he continued, his tone firmer, but still laden with pain. I was approached by the FBI in 1999. They offered me a deal. I had uncovered irregularities in a case related to my work at the Topeka airport. I was on a list. A list of people they wanted to silence. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, as if this gesture could hold back all the weight of this secret kept for too long. They offered me a witness protection program. But on one condition, I had to give up everything. Including you. A silence fell, heavy and oppressive, laden with unsaid things and accumulated pain. I couldn't breathe properly anymore. The air suddenly seemed too heavy, too thick, as if every word caught in my throat formed an impenetrable barrier. A part of me screamed, howled with rage and betrayal, ready to explode, to overturn everything in its path. But another part, more fragile, more wounded, wanted to believe again, to cling to the tenuous hope that all this was not a lie, that there was a reason, an explanation sweeter than abandonment. My voice trembled, carried by a mixture of anger and despair. And you couldn't say something? A message? Proof? Anything? I moved a little closer, my eyes filled with tears that I refused to let fall. You made me think you were dead. Finally, he turned his head towards me. His eyes, despite the years, were still the same as those I had loved so much, but now clouded with an old sadness, marked by the weight of time, by regret. They were older, tired, but of an immutable truth. Every day, Evelyn, every day, I wanted to break that silence. His voice was weak, as if this simple admission cost him a world. But they monitored everything. My calls, my messages. My rare attempts were stifled before they even reached you. A painful sigh, like a weight he had been carrying alone for too long. Then, when everything became possible, when I believed I could come back, it was too late. He looked down, almost ashamed. You had rebuilt your life. Ethan had become a man. I was nothing more than a ghost to you. At that moment it was Ethan who spoke, his calm voice contrasting with the inner storm that was stirring the woman beside him. He contacted me 6 months ago. He looked at his father with restrained gentleness, a mixture of respect and caution. He told me he was ill. Terminally ill. He paused, then added, in a lower, almost solemn voice. He wanted to see you, one last time. The silence that followed was almost palpable, heavy with all the unspoken emotions, all the still open wounds. We turned off the main road, gradually leaving the familiar landscape of golden fields and scattered farms behind, onto a small, bumpy dirt road lined with old oak trees with gnarled branches. Dusk spread its purple veil over the silent countryside, giving everything around us an almost unreal hue, as if time itself were slowing down to accompany us. The car moved slowly forward, buffeted by stones and roots beneath its wheels, until, at last, an old wooden house appeared, isolated, standing on top of a modest but proud hill. Its planks, bleached by the years, still bore the marks of wind and storms, but it exuded dignity and the past. A house that seemed frozen in time, guardian of silent stories. James carefully cut the engine, and there was silence, deep and almost sacred. He slowly got out of the car, his footsteps echoing softly on the gravel. Then, with a slow, respectful, almost ceremonial gesture, he opened the back door for me. This simple yet meaningful gesture broke my heart in a way I couldn't explain. I got out of the car, out of breath, my gaze drawn to the house that was once his family's refuge. His parents' house. Long abandoned, it had been forgotten by most, invaded by nature and time. Yet, recently, it had been carefully restored, as if someone wanted to bring it back to life, like a last tribute to a fading past. We entered together. Inside, everything was touchingly simple. A rough wooden table stood in the center of a bright room, lit by the soft glow of an old hanging lamp. 2 chairs faced each other, silent witnesses to a long-awaited reunion. On the table sat a small, humble but perfect cake, decorated with 3 lit candles that danced gently in the dim light, casting flickering shadows on the walls. James approached, his gaze lowered, his voice trembling but firm. "Evelyn. I only have a few weeks left." A shiver ran down my spine. Each word seemed to weigh an eternity. "I'm not asking you to forgive me." He looked up at me, and in that gaze, I read a disarming sincerity, a vulnerability that no words could ever describe. "But I just wanted to see you again." He paused, as if gathering all the courage in the world to continue. "And thank you and Ethan." I felt a tear well up in the corner of my eye, but I forced myself to stay strong. "For continuing." He lowered his head, his voice almost a whisper. "For keeping me alive, somehow." In this small house, at the top of a hill, the past and the present mingled in a soft, fragile light, but one that carried a peace that was difficult to attain. It was more than just a visit. It was a last dance between 2 broken lives, a farewell full of hope. I collapsed onto a chair, the weight of all those years suddenly too heavy to bear. My hands trembled, my breath came short, and my eyelids burned with a mixture of exhaustion and unshed tears. Everything I'd buried deep inside, the anger, the pain, the abandonment, came flooding back. My son, Ethan, knelt beside me, gently placing a hand on my back, a silent gesture of love and support. His presence was an anchor in the inner storm, a reminder that I was no longer alone in facing the past that had torn us all apart. James stood motionless for a moment, as if searching for words in the prevailing silence. Then, slowly, he leaned toward the cake on the table. His fingers trembled slightly, a testament to his newfound fragility. He gently blew out the 3 candles, the flames flickered and then went out, leaving the room in a peaceful, almost sacred darkness. No music. No party. Just a life ended. And 2 others marked forever. I felt my legs give way beneath me. I gathered what strength I had left and stood up, my heart heavy but determined. I looked him straight in the eyes, searching for the truth in that tired but sincere gaze. "Do you want me to forgive you?" I paused, letting each word echo in the air. "I don't know if I can." A silence. Then, with a gentleness I didn't know I possessed, I continued. "But I can say goodbye. For real." And there, right there, in front of me, in this room where the past had invited itself to haunt us, he cried. Not the tears of a fugitive pursued by his mistakes. Non. The tears of a man who had loved, who had lost, and who had carried this burden for far too long. These tears broke the chains of silence, opened a door to possible appeasement. For the first time in 26 years, the invisible wall between us has cracked. And in that fragile moment, we were just three human beings, united by the weight of time and the indelible force of love. James Callaghan died 3 weeks later. His fragile breath died peacefully, surrounded by the silence of the hills he had once left, but which he had chosen as his last refuge. The days that followed were marked by a sweetness mixed with sadness, as if time wanted to soothe the wounds opened by his return. The burial took place on the edge of a hill, where the light of the setting sun gently caresses the vast golden fields. A place chosen not by chance, but for its simple beauty and profound symbolism, the light that falls, the brilliance that always ends up touching even the darkest corners. On the tomb, a simple polished stone plaque bore these words, engraved with sobriety and respect. James Callaghan, father. Husband. Witness. Forgiven, perhaps. Loved, despite everything. These words reflected the ambivalence and complexity of a life marked by absence and presence, silence and truth, forgetting and forgiveness. Every year, on April 16th, the day everything changed, I go up to this place with Ethan. We walk slowly along the path lined with wildflowers, the wind gently playing with the leaves of the trees. We bring 3 candles, silent symbols of our intertwined lives, James's, mine, and Ethan's, witness to our story. We light these flames carefully, watching their flickering light rise into the dusk. And in this suspended moment, between shadow and light, we remember that certain truths, even late and imperfect, are always better than eternal silences. That life, with its wounds and its reconciliations, deserves to be lived, told, and above all, forgiven. Because in the end, it is love, despite everything, that traces the brightest path.